Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Mantry, and I am here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And happy 9th anniversary, Tom. Your 9th anniversary on this podcast, anyway. Not so much mine.
Yeah. How many anniversaries is it? About like three, two?
I don't recall. We'll leave it to our faithful AV Rant listeners and perhaps our producer Austin to figure out when the heck I showed up. I mean, I showed up quite a while back in my very first guest appeararance because I know Dina was still around.
Yeah, you've been around since Dina, but
as a full-time host, I don't remember.
Been a bit.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So technical issues. Starting 20 minutes late. Sucks. Not sure what's going on with that. It should have worked. Didn't work. Nothing worked. Had to go install more programs. Couldn't get it back into my own podcast feed or Google Hangout feed. It's very frustrating. I'm very frustrated right now. Probably going to be extra angry. Just got to get to that.
9 years in, extra ranty.
That's right. For me. 9 years of AV Rant. We're off by a day. I think tomorrow is it?
Yeah, tomorrow technically for the people who are watching this live or seeing the YouTube feed. It is the 10th of May when AV Rant number 1 was posted.
That's right. Me and Dina back in the day talking about
pseudo surround.
Cerwin Vegas. Didn't we talk about
Cerwin Vegas? I'm sure Cerwin Vegas were mentioned. Yeah,
I think they were in there. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. Send us an email at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com. Leave a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRantPodcast. And Twitter at AVRant_Tom for me, at First Reflect for you, and at Austin Pond for Austin, our producer. Our producer also has his own podcast, We Watch Movies. It is a podcast about the color yellow.
Okay.
Yeah. Just yellow things.
Not the color purple.
Nope.
The color yellow.
Just the color yellow.
Right.
Things that are yellow, what to do with yellow, what looks good with yellow. Mostly they just think yellow looks good with yellow. I don't necessarily agree with that, but yeah, it's not my podcast.
And we will mention our personal email addresses are rob@avrant.com for me, tom@avrant.com for Tom. And it is helpful to email all three of our addresses, but particularly question@avrant.com. That goes to our producer, Austin, who puts it in the question queue. But if all three of us receive it, so much the better.
Yes. It doesn't hurt. But question is the one you want for sure. We are steering people that way. So this is our 9th anniversary. I've been promising there'll be some changes to the podcast if we never stop having technical issues. That will happen sooner rather than later. Rob and I have to have a couple more conversations before that happens, but you will know. All you 9-year listeners of AV Rant Podcast, fear not, your podcast will stay the same, probably 2-hour length, except for today, which will be an hour and a half length, that it has always been, or at least has been for the last couple of years since Rob got on and bloated it like the Hindenburg. Now, we also want to thank our listeners of the week.
Yes, we do.
First, we have Jeff to thank. He's the one that actually reminded us that it was he thought it was 10th. I thought it was 10th. We were both wrong. It was our 9th year anniversary. And for 9 years, he wanted to give us a donation. So he went to www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and left us a PayPal donation, which he did either through his linked PayPal account or through a credit card, which PayPal processes and all that nonsense. Yes. So we thank you, Jeff, for that donation.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And thank you for the reminder that it was the anniversary date, because it wasn't.
Also want to thank Tom K, wowho bought a Marantz SR7010 receiver from Accessories for Less, and let them know it was because of our recommendation actually got acknowledgement that they've noticed all the referrals.
Yes.
So
that's right.
Apparently, it's not just going into the void over there. Somebody over there is going, those AV Rant guys, they talk about us.
Yep.
Maybe we should throw them a big stack of money so that Tom can start paying Rob and Austin for all their hard work, because Tom's just never going to get paid for this podcast. I do want to just, we don't always talk about technical issues or technical behind the scene things on the podcast, but I do want to say, because I know that both you and Austin will listen to this podcast, that I want to start getting the question list on Friday or Saturday. Friday would be better. So
considering that most of our questions come in on Saturday and Sunday, that could be a challenge.
Well, that means that this next week might be very slight, but then it'll roll over and we'll be fine.
Wow.
Okay. I'm okay with that because the way this right now is I'm getting the Monday morning, which it should give me plenty of time to look at it. It totally does not, because for reasons that I can only believe is the machinations of an evil god, all of my children have all of their things to do on Monday. And it's like I get home from work, we ran getting everything done, and I walked back into the house at 8:30, to which my 6-year-old son said, "You're going to read to me, right?" Mental development must have not dumb children. Yes, I'll read to you, son, because I love you so much. So yeah, I know. So we can maybe do it Sunday. I don't really care, but we need to push it back at least 36 hours would be super awesome. Saturday night. I know I don't want to suck up your weekend. That's why I said Friday, like Friday. You know, because you're the one that puts them together.
It doesn't. I have no time, so it doesn't matter when it is. It has to be like Sunday at 2 a.m., which is when I do it these days. So
see, that's why I can't ever get it. All right, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it with Austin, and maybe we can come up with a streamlined effect. And maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll put it together. It's it's not beyond the pale. I've only let you do it because you would like to do it. So, anyways, at least I thought you did. Maybe you don't. Maybe I'll find out afterwards that you hate me. All right, in the news tomorrow, the May 10th. Oh, wait, where's it that? All right, so AV Rant #1 was pseudo surround marketing and things to do in hotel rooms. Now that podcast is no longer available. If you really want to listen to it, you will have to come to my house and borrow the DVD because it's all on the DVD someplace. And don't come to my house. Tom K also pointed out to us that MQA has entered into a deal with Warner Brothers, the Warner Music Group, to release Warner's music catalog in the MQA's higher resolution audio format. MQA is what? Meridian, right? Is that Meridian?
Yep. It's but this stands for Master Quality Authenticated.
Yes, which is code for no one's going to know what it is. No one's ever going to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that the file size is still the size of a CD, and that the file itself is still a 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz CD file that can be played by any CD player or any piece of software that could play CDs, but there's additional metadata on top of it. And that metadata isn't really so much extra information. It's supposed to be a thing that allows an MQA decoder, because MQA does require its own special decoder.
Of course it does.
And it's supposed to allow it to authenticate that what it ultimately outputs is equal in quality, because it's not actually lossless packaging, but supposed to be equal in quality to whatever the master was, be that 24-bit 96 kilohertz or 24-bit 192 kilohertz or whatever. Supposedly, whoever created the master is supposed to listen to both versions and go, yes, I give my seal of approval to the MQA version.
Dude, that is the easiest job. Do you realize that? That is literally the easiest job. The guy's sitting there going, I could do this all day long. That's all he did.
Given that there have been record producers who listened to MQA's, trials and demonstrations and said, this sounds better than the master I created, I go, well, there's the problem, isn't it? Because they don't even understand what the thing is supposed to be, let alone what it actually is, which is nothing. It's nothing, because CD quality is already lossless to our ears. We can't hear better than CD quality, but nonetheless, here it is, this thing. So more money, that's what it really means. More money to you, the consumer, because Warner Brothers isn't going to foot the bill for this thing. They're going to pass it along to you.
Yeah, so it's a $20 CD. That's good. You're going to buy the original, and then you're going to buy this one. And only the people who absolutely believe that this is a real thing will hear the difference.
Yeah.
That'll be the difference. That will literally be it. I'm not saying that you know that we're not anti-technology on this podcast. We absolutely are not. But what we are is anti-BS. And this is so clearly BS that it is the same way I felt. I felt the same way about the THX certification for a lot of things. THX certification was just I mean, it's not like it wasn't a thing. It was a thing. They actually tested stuff, but it was not the most minimum. Ray, I can hear Ray typing furiously right now.
No, it was just you could easily make a product that was not THX certified that either could have been, as in it would have passed had they put it up, had they paid the money to have it certified, or it materially made no difference in that you could not hear or see the difference for not having gone through the THX certification.
And THX guys would have told you that they have never had a product that came in that got certified without some changes.
Oh,
meaning
sure, yeah.
that they were making that something didn't pass or didn't pass well enough or whatever. But you can look at in the history. You look back at Onkyo, I think was the prime. Every other year they would get THX certification.
Yeah.
Same, in between, you're like, what's the real difference here? Nothing. The real difference is 1 year they paid for certification, next year they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think they're just going to spread that cost out over 2 years. That was pretty much it. So this is not that. This is because I think CHX was something, even though I thought it wasn't very useful. And as a consumer, I think they went away because people were like, we're not paying for this anymore because it really is not helping us sell anything. This is going to be even worse, I hope. I hope it is because it's
Lord only knows.
It's complete BS. Somebody, unless Dr. Dre gets behind it, it's dead. Infinite Gary says that Star Trek Beyond will be shown in the Cinerama like Barco Escape 3-screen format in theaters that can support it. Which is there like one at Disney World and something like that?
I don't know. They are claiming that there are 50 such theaters. I don't know if that's world. I think that's worldwide.
It's got to be worldwide.
There are 50 such theaters.
So there's at least how many Disney Worlds are there? There's got to be 3 of those, right?
I don't even know if that's where they are, but no. I mean, it does harken back to the old Cinerama days where it was 3 projectors all stitched together side by side. So these actually sort of come up the side walls of the theater.
Yeah.
And so they're saying with Star Trek Beyond, it's not as though they filmed the entire movie in this format. In fact, they made this arrangement after Star Trek Beyond was already done production. So they are going back and they are going to create some scenes that are entirely CG to add to these side panels, or they're going to use some production footage that was shot but was never going to be used in the regular release, but they're like, well, this can actually be like either stitched together or we just framed it wider than what we actually used for the regular release, and they can add that into the side, or they can do a combo of some footage and some CG effect. But in total, they're looking at about 20 minutes out of the entire movie might be in this format, so you're going to pay whatever the premium is, which I'm sure is pretty steep, to go look at these 3 screens, and the vast majority of the time, the 2 screens on the sides will just be sitting there blank. But for 20 minutes...
And the other 20 minutes, it will be full of stuff that they didn't want in the movie, or they made a computer put into the movie, which clearly that is valuable.
Not only were there the ships you could see in the armada of this fleet, there were some extra ones.
Look at these other ships over here. This is a good ship.
There were some more.
That was that guy who always came up with the ships that kind of looked a little bit on the dirty side.
I will laugh
I don't know about that one. Let's cut that one. I will laugh so
hard if it's like a phaser blast. That's all you see is a phaser blast.
I think it should be nothing but like lens flare. Just lens flare.
It's not J.J. Abrams anymore.
He just shoots it all the way across. Oh yeah, this is gonna be full of lens flare. Oh, it's not James. Oh yeah, you're right. It's not J.J. Abrams anymore. That's right. It's the Fast and Furious guy.
That's right.
I don't know that that's necessarily a terrible thing, to be honest with you. J.J. Abrams revamped this thing to be in action. It was never an action. I mean, at best it was suspense, and you could say that the first movie was suspenseful, but without the suspense, it was just a lot of waiting.
It's just a lot of people, the camera pointed at people's faces as they stared with their mouths slightly slack-jawed.
Just going, we're on a weird planet thing, and something weird's happening, and there's a bald chick. All right, so and in the second movie, frankly, there was not a whole lot of action. And the action that they had was pretty minimal. And then there was a very quiet space battle at the end, which was awesome. But, come on. You know what that didn't need? 2 extra screens either. So let's see here.
Tyler F.
I know, but I just pressed the wrong button. I'm trying to fix it. All right, Tyler. Bowers Wilkins, the famous speaker company that is over 50 years old and has over 1,000 employees, was purchased by EVA Automation, a Silicon Valley startup founded in 2014 by former Facebook CEO and current San Francisco 49ers owner Gideon Yu.
CFO. He was the chief financial officer.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, CFO. EVA has 50 employees and 0 products on the market, but they do have a vague website that promises to reimagine the video experience by making products that will change how people interact and think about the home. I read that as headphones and Bluetooth speakers. So
I mean, the thing is, this came not entirely as a shock, because there was talk of Bowers and Wilkins looking for a buyer previously, but it wasn't largely in the news. And then It comes at somewhat of a shock when the news came out because they're like, whoa, this little startup that has existed for less than 2 years is buying this very well established and very well known speaker company. However, obviously, Gideon Yu, who has founded this company, is a very, very wealthy person. And he is a big fan of Bowers and Wilkins. And he has said, look, we're not attempting to stop them from making speakers. He bought them because he loves their speakers. And Bowers and Wilkins was saying that even though they are a large company with a large staff, they felt that they don't have the knowledge base to transition into cloud-based streaming and more whole house audio type of stuff. So they're trying to put these sorts of things together, particularly cloud-based stuff is what they're really saying they're going to focus on, this new company. So it could ultimately end up being all right. You're going to have a well-established speaker company making the actual transducers that will ultimately create the sound, and then you're going to have these tech guys making the tech
to
work.
get into cloud-based stuff. That's what I don't understand. Why does Bauer? I mean, they make speakers. That's what they do. They've been making them for 50 years.
Yeah.
They're super. I mean, they're esoteric, or not really, but you know, they've got their loyal fan base. I don't really see why they need, but clearly I understand why they need to sell, because they're not profitable. I mean, that's why you sell. You're like, we're hemorrhaging money, so we need to get some more money. And that's what they do. You sell. Whatever. We'll see what happens. I feel bad for all you B&W fans out there, because I would be sweating right now and grabbing any B&W speaker you really, really loved. I'm thinking of Jonathan right now because he really liked some B&W speakers a while back. Yep. I'm thinking of you, Jonathan. Keep your eyes open.
Well, I mean, you know, Klipsch has survived and even thrived once they got purchased. All the Canadian brands that they purchased before them didn't do so hot.
Yeah.
Klipsch is still here.
Yes, they are. All right. Got some comments from last week. Nathan contacted Oppo about the release of the new UHD or Ultra HD players and was told to expect a successor to the BDP-103 late this year. We're getting pretty close to late this year right now. And successor to the BDP-105 in early 2017. So I'm thinking CDIA and CDS is what those two things are probably mean.
Announced at least.
Yes, well, that's when they'll be announced. When they ship, God knows. Jeb figured out why some of us need curved TVs, so they can be mounted into the entertainment center cubby holes that used to hold big TVs prior to us completely defining what a big TV was when flat panels arrived. If you remember, you bought this big square opening for your 36-inch CRT.
It was.
That was as big. Are you putting it up right now?
Oh yeah, pictures up there.
Okay, there it is. Let's click on Rob. So you can see there's an opening here. If you're looking at the YouTube video, there's an opening for a big old CRT that clearly was very large and had enough room around it to even get a bigger one in there. But then you get a curved screen and kind of pop it in there. I guess there must be a mount in there though too, right? That just doesn't sit in there like that. Can't possibly.
I would imagine that's the idea. Yeah, there's no way it's just standing like that.
Yeah.
So put a mount in the back, and then it allows it to sort of curve out. I don't know. I guess if it was a truly flat one, then the entire TV would be proud of the cubby. So this is a way to have a small portion of the flat panel TV within the cubby still.
I just loathe those things. I loathe them. I give them hate glares as I'm walking through, Sam's or Best Buy. I haven't walked through Best Buy forever.
I don't see the need for a curved TV.
Yeah. Anyways, that was nice. Clearly, James liked our AV Rant sponsored street stock racing car so much, he decided to sponsor a race car himself. With this dynamic technologies, dynamic technologies installation. Is that what it is? Is that what installation is?
James is a custom installer, so
he is.
He has thrown up what is a large logo on the back of this race car. I'm not sure who this race car belongs to or what league they race in or anything like that. But there it is.
There it is.
He's got
it's very orange.
Logo. Yep.
Orange and purple. Apparently. Favorite colors. All right.
That's pretty cool.
So that was last. Okay. So these are questions from last week. Nathan. Nathan is having Odyssey problems, he says. His system is all Triad speakers with the Marantz SR6010 and Pro C 3-channel outboard amp for the left, right, and center speakers. The LCR, the left, center, and right channels, are behind a Seymour AV acoustically transparent screen. And he has about 30% of the walls covered with acoustic panels. Half are GIC bass traps and half are diffusion.
Okay.
The room is 12 by 17 by 7.5. So it's a fairly small room. The problem is Odyssey is boosting the high frequencies a huge amounts. And are you putting graphs up right now? Do I?
Here they come. Here's the first one. This is front left and front right being shown on the screen right now. And so what the graph is showing is essentially a representation of what the Odyssey automatic equalizer has done, where it has boost and cut the response that it measured. So indeed, if you're looking at the treble portion, then a good portion of that has been raised, and it looks as though the maximum it can boost or cut is 10 decibels, and it's using what, maybe 6 out of that?
Yeah, and it's starting someplace. Is it 20K, then 10K is the next line? Is that what it is? And then 1K, right? Is that what it is?
I'll have to look at a larger version.
I can't really see it. Anyways, whatever. It's kind of what's okay. Blah, blah. His problem is he's run Odyssey multiple times with dynamic EQ on and off with different reference offsets and tried reference curve and the flat curve. The boosting happens every time. Is there a problem to be concerned about, or should you just trust Odyssey? Well, the first thing I did is I looked up the frequency response of your speakers, and since you didn't say what speakers you had, I looked up.
Well, yeah, he did. They are Triad. They're called in-room gold Triad.
Oh, that was when I looked up.
Yeah.
You can find a review of those in Stereophile and the in-wall or in-room. In-room. I think they had. I think they had a measurement of the in-wall and in-room golds along with whatever the subwoofer is, and both the in-wall and the in-room ones dropped off pretty heavily towards the upper frequencies, right around 15 kilohertz, which is higher than what this thing is boosting. So part of this is that. And in fact, I have rarely seen Odyssey not try to boost the top end, to be honest with you. And I don't know if that's a microphone thing or what, but especially in a room that's treated, you're not going to get the reflections around that you're going to get in a non-treated room. So very well maybe boosting a little bit because of that. The real question becomes, at least to me, is what are you hearing?
Yes.
Does it sound trebly and terrible? Or does it sound sort of okay? Because if it sounds sort of okay, then I don't know that I would be worried considerably about this.
Yeah, well, something I really wanted to point out was that as we go start with the front left and right speakers, then look at the center speaker, then look at the surround speakers and the surround backs and even the overhead speakers, you'll notice that even though, yes, it is applying some equalization and some boost to the treble of all of them, it is not identical amongst all of them. Right. Meaning that it's not as though this is just something Odyssey is applying willy-nilly, or this is just something Odyssey does. It's like, no, it measured and corrected for something that it measured, because from position to position, the correction is different. And like the center speaker is corrected far less than the others. Right. So that tells me that this isn't like a problem with Odyssey. This is the response it received. It's saying, if I'm going to bring this back to, first of all, flat, but then correct from there for, whatever target curve you're using, the reference Odyssey target curve, as the case might be, it believes, in any case, from the measurements that it took, that it needs to apply some equalization. Now, there's several factors to his setup that make me say that I'm not hugely surprised by that. One, the speakers themselves, as Tom said, yes, when you measure them anechoically, they have some high frequency roll off. They are a soft dome tweeter, so nothing about that is surprising. Right. Most soft dome tweeters do need to be rolled off a little bit in the treble. And then the measurements say that, yeah, that's kind of the case. And not only that, in this room, it appears anyway, I'm just eyeballing it a little bit from the couple of screenshots that he sent, but if you look at the position of his screen relative to his seats, and then you look at where the speakers are positioned behind that screen, because it's an acoustically transparent screen, it looks to me as though the tweeters of all his front speakers are a little bit higher than his head. when he's sitting down, and then his surround and surround back speakers, and of course the overhead speakers, they're all elevated too. So when you're a little bit off axis vertically, you're probably going to lose a little bit of what would be the on axis treble response. In which case, that's what the microphone's going to measure. It's going to go, oh, to get me back to flat, I need to boost that a little bit. So I think there's a confluence of things that would make me say I would expect there to be a little bit of high frequency roll off when measured. And then the boost that's being applied, it's not egregious. I mean, he was worried because he sees this like hump in the
huge
graph,
hump, right?
But it's really only at most maybe 5 or 6 decibels. It's not even in the center speaker. It's like maybe 3 decibels, which is totally normal, in fact.
Yeah.
And it's just the fact that it's applying it across a fairly wide spectrum of high frequencies, but there's nothing here to make me think that anything is really going wrong.
I wonder if you turn those speakers upside down, if you bring those tweeters down a little bit.
Yeah.
You could do that. The other thing you could think about doing, and this is just for your own peace of mind, is I take one of those speakers and I just like face it. It looks like they may be turned in a little bit, right? I would take one of those speakers and turn it. I would tow it out away from you a little bit, and then run Odyssey again and see if that speaker. I would bet that speaker would get a very different look to it, because basically, if you look at the fronts, they are pretty uniform, which you kind of would expect. They're all in the same plane. Yeah. They're all kind of aiming towards you. You would expect them to be pretty uniform, and they're uniform in the curve as well. I'm not really seeing a problem here.
No.
I think this looks pretty normal to me.
No, if I was seeing a boost that was using the entire 10 decibel range, and I was seeing a uniform correction across all 9 of your speakers, regardless of where they're positioned, then I go, ooh, maybe something's kind of hinky there. But I'm like, nah, there's nothing particularly shocking or surprising in these, and it is a different correction for each speaker. So as far as I can tell, Odyssey's doing what it's supposed to do, which is measure and then equalize for the response that it got.
Yeah. All right, Jonathan has an Nvidia Shield TV, which can output 4K, a regular 1080p Blu-ray player, and the cable box. And the cable box, of course, is 720p or 1080i. I don't think there's any. I don't even know if a cable box is 1080p. All plugged into his Denon AVR X2200W AV receiver. The output from this X2200 goes through a 30-foot red mirror HDMI cable plus another 6-foot HDMI extension cable to his Vizio M70 UHD TV. Kind of unfortunate that he has to have that 6-foot extension cable. But
it might be to do with the mount, because he's like, the way he's got it mounted, it's just needed the extra.
Yeah. Right now, he has the HDMI cable plugged into his HDMI 1 port on his Vizio. This input offers HDCP 2.2, but only accepts 4K 30 hertz. HDMI 2 input is the same, but HDMI 5 input on his Vizio only accepts up to 4K. Input on his Vizio supposedly accepts up to 4K 60 hertz.
Right.
Because reasons.
So there's a lone input that has the full 18 gigabits per second bandwidth, whereas the others are limited to the 10.2 gigabits per second bandwidth.
He has read, however, that the HDMI 5 has really crappy upscaling and deinterlacing as it's basically a pass-through input. I don't know why one input's scaling would be worse than any other.
Well, they do have those instances where some don't go through the video processing.
Yeah, that it's not like some scaling would be better than others in the TV. Some might have scaling and some might not. In which case,
well, I mean, anything has to have the most basic scaling just so it matches the resolution of the display. But there have been instances like often you'll see where 3 of the ports are on the back and then 2 of the ports are on the side, and they don't all necessarily go through the same chips. I mean, sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. So in this case, it seems like there's this one lone port that's probably not going through the same video processing chip as the other 4 ports.
Right. Jonathan's only 4K source is his Nvidia Shield TV, and his only 4K service is YouTube, because he doesn't pay for Netflix, Amazon Prime. I guess he has Netflix and maybe an Amazon Prime, but he doesn't pay for the extra for the 4K.
Right.
Is there a 4K? There's a 4K thing.
There is a 4K upcharge for both of them.
And when he has the Shield TV set up to allow 4K output resolution, his MLB TV streams are unwatchable with lots of stuttering. If he switches the Shield TV to the 1080p 60 hertz output, everything looks fine. But now, of course, YouTube is no longer in 4K. How much 4K YouTube are you watching? What is the 4K content on YouTube?
Very little.
Like,
yeah.
I can't.
It's just that when you set the Nvidia Shield TV to allow 4K output, it upscales everything to 4K. So then it's sending out a 4K 60 signal of everything,
whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Anyways, he could manually switch to Shield TV, especially since he only has one 4K service, but he's just curious if there's a better solution.
Sure. I mean, that's fair enough. So, I mean, he's aware of, yes, if you're only occasionally watching 4K, it's only from one source and it's only from one service, then of course you could just manually adjust the settings. When you're going to use that 4K source, you switch it into 4K mode. When you're not, you switch it back to 1080p 60 and everything works fine. But he's just like,
doesn't he have a Harmony remote? It seems like he should be able to program a button to do this.
That's more steps when you're talking about going into a settings menu or something like
that. There's no flip 4K on and off button.
No, you have to go into the settings. It's Android. The whole thing is Android. You got to remember.
You could try using the HDMI 5 input instead, but there's no guarantee it will work better. And the way he has his TV mounted means he needs to take it off the wall just to unplug from the HDMI 1 and plug into the HDMI 5 instead.
Yeah.
So that seems like a hassle.
I mean,
that's what he said.
It probably will work, as in 4K 60 will probably go through that port and not stutter and be okay. However, you're right. There's no guarantee that particular MLB.TV service, when upscale, I mean, maybe the problem is when it's upscaled inside the Android TV box. Maybe that's the problem, as opposed to it being the TV. Right? We don't actually know.
Very well could be. And the other problem is that he's watching baseball, and baseball's boring.
But I mean, we honestly don't.
Literally the worst sport. The worst. I would watch literally years of curling before I'd watch an hour of baseball if I had an option. And I watched my son play baseball. And the only reason I like watching him play baseball is because I make fun of him the entire time. He can't hear me, but it's hilarious to watch these little kids, 6 years old, trying to play baseball. This is literally the worst thing. It's just, it's like you could put seals out there, they would do just as good. It's hilarious. But go on. Yes.
Yeah, no. So I mean, it does seem possible. I would be curious if this were easy. If you didn't have a situation where unplugging from one port and plugging to the other meant having to get behind the TV and unmount it from the wall first, and it was easy to do, then obviously I'd say give it a try. But I have no guarantee to give that this is going to work, because I'm not certain that the problem is the port that you're plugged into. Although it very well could be. I'm a little hesitant to say that I really think it is, though, because when they say HDMI input 1 and HDMI input 2 on the Vizio can only accept up to 4K 30 hertz, it's not so much that it's really that frame rate that they're talking about. They're talking about the data rate, which is 10.2 gigabits per second. And the Shield TV box should not be, well, I don't know, maybe there's a setting in there, but it should not be putting out 10-bit or 12-bit color, because the source is an 8-bit source. So if this is 8-bit 4K resolution, even at 60 hertz, that should still fit inside of a 10.2 gigabit per second bandwidth. So to me, I'm suspicious that maybe it's the upscaling inside of the Shield TV itself that's causing the stuttering, as opposed to the television.
I wonder if there's what is there resolution options in this thing where he can?
Yeah, there are, but there's you can either just choose 1080p or 4K.
That stinks.
Yeah.
All right. His Denon AV X2200W does have two HDMI outputs. If he turns out that the HDMI 5 looks crappy with the 1080i and 1080p sources, could he send those to HDMI 1 and then send only his Shield TV to HDMI 5? And would there be handshaking issues? Well, you shouldn't be handshaking issues, I don't think, because you're going to the same source.
To the same TV.
Yeah, you're going to the same TV. So the problems we've had before with handshaking issues is you go to one TV, and then you go to another, you go to a TV, and you go to a projector. And those are different devices, and the handshake goes, wait a second, this one's not on. Something is askew. You're stealing from us. And then,
however, I question a little bit, because so the outputs on the X2200W are mirrored. They're not independent. They're not separate zones. So will it default to lowest common denominator, right? Because it's going to get one set of instructions from the HDMI 5 input saying, you can send 18 gigabits per second to me. But it's going to get a second set of instructions from the HDMI 1 input that says I can only take 10.2.
Yeah, it might go for the lowest common denominator.
And it might go lowest common denominator. Again, I'm not certain that's what it'll do. Maybe you have to have the TV powered on and turn to the correct input first before turning on the AV receiver. It could be one of those situations, which could be programmed in a Harmony.
Let's just put it this way, Jonathan. Your best bet, I mean, I don't know what else we're going to get to here, but your best bet almost certainly is to plug directly into the HDMI 5 and pray to the audio gods that it looks good. Yeah, that's your best bet.
If you do that, like let's say you send 4K 60 out of the Shield TV box, whether that's upscaled or whether that's coming directly from YouTube, and you put that into the HDMI 5 input on the Vizio, and all goes swimmingly well. Now everything looks great. You can leave the Shield TV on 4K output. Now your concern that you're describing is that you're worried that when you send 1080p from all of your other sources to that same HDMI 5 input on the Vizio, that since the Vizio supposedly has crappy upscaling on that HDMI 5 input, you're worried that, oh, now your 1080p sources and 1080i from your cable box.
But that won't be an issue because it's not going to do any scaling. It's
you can let the Denon do it.
No, or the Denon, yeah. Well, Nvidia would be doing it anyways if it's outputting 4K.
No, but his other sources aren't going through the Nvidia.
Oh, those sources, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So your other source, if the problem ends up being that using HDMI 5 on your Vizio means that the Vizio does a crappy job of upscaling, then let your Denon do the upscaling, because the Denon is capable of upscaling any source to 4K output. And I don't know if its scaler is better than the one that's built into the Vizio, but if the problem is that the particular input on the Vizio, the HDMI 5, has a really crappy upscaler, then the one in the Denon is probably better. So you could be outputting 4K from the Denon. So all of your sources still feed into the Denon as you've had it. Your Shield TV still feeds in 4K as it has been, but all your other sources are feeding in 1080 either. 1080i or 1080p, then the Denon goes ahead and upscales everything to 4K, so the only thing that gets sent to your Vizio is 4K.
And you can usually do that per input, so you turn on the scaling per input, and you would just not turn it on the NVIDIA one.
Well, I think on these Denons, I mean, it just has video conversion. Video conversion on or off. You have to turn it on and then set the output resolution.
If it's getting 4K, then it's not going to do any scaling.
No, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to scale 4K. It's not going to try and do anything to that. So.
All right. Instead of the 6-foot extension cable, he could use a splitter. Again, the idea would be to send 1080 resolution sources to the HDMI 1 and 4K sources to HDMI 5. Would this work? I don't know of a splitter that recognizes resolution. And
I mean,
the only way you think you'd run into the same issue, the only way that would I don't see how that working.
No, I mean, if you wanted to do this, then you would need to be certain you'd need to use an HD Fury so that the TV doesn't get any EDID information and it doesn't know that it's coming from two separate places. I mean, that's the workaround. But again, not necessary, because you can just set your Denon to output 4K no matter what. And then you've bypassed what might not even be a problem. Maybe you plug everything into HDMI 5 and if you're like, looks fine to me. So so just regardless, you shouldn't need to use two HDMI. I mean, in his case, that would mean buying another 35-foot HDMI cable, which I'm like, I mean, even for mono price, that's not super cheap. So just use what you got.
All right. He's considering adding rear surrounds to his system versus, is it better to have one speaker or two for this purpose?
Two.
I put two fingers up and he said the words two. Yeah. We did 6.1 for a while and everybody universally agreed that it kind of sucked. If nothing,
not Joe Kane. Joe Kane is still holding on to that like grim death. But
slap echoes. I mean, that alone, I think, kind of killed it. The slap echo. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, we used to put a single speaker in the back for just literally. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we get to the video shifting 4K projectors in a few minutes. But whenever a brand new technology comes out, there's usually some company who's like, we really want to offer this, but we can't offer this because we don't have time to get the technology shoehorned into our stuff. So this is our workaround. And for a while before we went to 7.1, we had 6.1, and that 6.1 was a surround back speaker. And every once in a while, somebody would write to the forums and say, all the surround back information is coming out of my center channel.
Sounds like it.
That's impossible. It can't be. Like, no, it is. Every time something is supposed to happen behind me, I can hear it right in front of me coming from my center channel. And we're like, nope, That's just not possible. The wires, unless you plug both wires into your center channel, turns out that what was happening is that the front, the speaker in the back was playing like it should, hit the front wall, got the slap echo, usually because there's a window or a big flat screen TV up there, bounced off of that, and it would hit the people would hear it coming from the front of the room. And that would make them think it was coming from the center channel. So as soon as 7 point whatever came around, that stopped happening. So that's why. So anyways, as a first, it's better to have one speaker too. It's two. And should he stick with ELAC, maybe the B4 when it comes out? B4 is actually the letter B, the number 4 for a speaker that they're going to be making. Or maybe something smaller, maybe a lot smaller at the expense of timbre matching, which probably isn't a big deal for the rear surrounds, he says.
How much cheaper are you going to go? They're $180 a pair for those B4 models.
I know. The ones I would recommend to you would probably, if you were going to go smaller, would be something like the NHTs, and those are now like $120
more expensive.
So
I guess you could just grab some like monoprice bookshelf speakers. Those would be cheaper.
You could. I mean, you could. Rear surrounds do not have to be that timbre match. That being said, those are pretty cheap, dude. So if you've got something in your mind that maybe is cheaper or that you already own, and can I just slap them back there? Yeah, slap them back there. That's fine. Now, if you're going to buy something, might as well buy the thing that actually matches it.
Again, in the image that I'm showing on screen, you don't really get a sense of how close he is to that back wall, but he's in a very small room and has very little room behind him, and I seriously question whether going to 7 speakers is even a good idea at all.
Why don't you just put them on the ceiling?
Well, he's got that sloped ceiling. He would if he could. He's mentioned that before. Yeah. I mean, you could go for front heights. You could go for front heights.
It looks like he's far enough back where it would make a difference. Yeah, that he could use it.
Going to 7 speakers in his room. Like I'm talking 7 speakers total is not a horribly bad idea because his X2200 is an Atmos receiver. Now, it's important to know that even the traditional 7 speaker setup with surround backs is an Atmos setup. You can still use Atmos and still use object-based audio even with no overhead speakers as long as you have surround backs. So maybe he's thinking along those lines, but you could definitely use them as front heights and have Atmos. You can get some, like he's already using Pro
he's
Monitor
only
stands.
He's only like a couple of feet off that back wall, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean,
he's already using Pro Monitor stands to hold his surround speakers that are elevated. The same company, because he's got the Yorkville stands. Yorkville also makes a stand that with a top that is actually more like a clamp that you can pivot downward. So he could get some of those for the front heights and actually have them like angled down to get more of a if this is coming from above you effect.
Aesthetically not as pleasing.
No, there's that. So I mean the surround backs, I won't say no to them. You're going to have them on stands anyway. But I mean, once you have them, you could try them behind you and try them as front heights, right? There's nothing stopping you from experimenting. As long as you're having the tall stands anyway. Yeah.
So he actually asked how high they should be mounted, near ear level, higher. Well, they got to be above the back. They got to be able to hit your ears.
Yeah, line of sight.
So line of sight to your ears, wherever that is in relation to your chair, basically.
But I mean, right now, where he has his surround speakers, I'd say same height as those. Those look great. When he's sitting in that seat, assuming his head is just slightly above the back of that seat cushion, like most people's heads would be, then the tweeter of his surround speakers is maybe 1.5 feet above that.
Yeah, Jonathan, I honestly think that you're not going to find much benefit to those speakers in the rear.
I mean, you'll notice them. You'll certainly notice them at first, but over time, you're like, well, I notice them, but they're also somewhat distracting, and that's not what they're supposed to be.
Because I had speakers that were about as close as what you're talking about relative to each other, and I ended up turning off my surround backs.
When it was that setup. When it was
that setup, I just had to get
I mean, in my own theater, I've now gone to a I don't even know what to call it, 5+2.2.4 because I'm using 5 speakers and then front wides and then 4 height speakers because I'm using rear heights. So I'm like, I don't need rear heights and surround backs. I don't need them. I'd rather have the rear heights. So
we asked, should ear level when sitting up versus reclined be taken into account? I mean, yeah, but how do you normally sit, I suppose? I mean, I often watch TV lying down on my couch, even though that it's a recliner couch that I have now, but I don't set my speakers up so that they hit they're in line of sight of my ear when I'm lying on one of the armrests.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
would say, I mean, if the thing is sometimes you watch sitting upright and sometimes you watch sitting reclined, then just get them high enough that in either instance you will have a clear line of sight. That's all you need.
All right, new for this week, we got Jefferson ran Odyssey per our instructions. This is the guy with 4 subwoofers. We said run them so that you can get all the different distances, and then we'll match them up. With each subwoofer volume knob set to negative 23 dB with the following results. Front left was 11.8 feet at negative 3.5 dB.
That's the trim level. So he put the volume knob of he has 4 SB13 Ultra subwoofers from SVS. Right. He's got 2 of them set up at the front, 2 of them flanking his couch, but his entire theater is offset in his room, and then it's a much bigger space around that. So he set the volume knob on the back of each subwoofer to the same point for all of them. So they're all starting with the same amount of gain. And then Odyssey did this, so what we're reading out now are the trim levels that Odyssey set.
Right. Okay, so 11.8 and negative 3.5 dB for the front left sub. The front right sub was 11.9 feet with negative 2 dB. The left back one was 8.8 with 0. The right back was 8.8 with negative 4.5.
Yeah. So he, without even using the thing that was suggested last week by 2 folks who wrote in, he essentially got a pair of subwoofers. It happened to be the front, left, and right, but that might not have been the
kind of what I said.
But that's what it turned out to be. The front, left, and right are essentially measured to have the same delay by Odyssey, and the back, left, and right subs, the 2 that are flanking his couch, were measured to have the same delay. However, they were all measured to have different volumes, and that's actually the thing we really want to be equal at the seat. More so than the delays.
Yes. Okay, so the first thing you need to do before we do anything else is stop messing. You need to get the volume of each one of these subs to be equal.
Yeah.
So before you run Odyssey.
That's right.
So you could theoretically just turn down that volume knob, 3 or up that volume knob 3.5 dB for the left front, 2 dB for the right front, leave the left back alone, and 4.5 up for the right back. Or you get your SBL meter, measure them all to 72 dB.
72, yes. We would be measuring them all to 72 in this case.
Because they're going to all get boosted up anyways, 3 dB, because they're all in the same room.
When they're all going to combine.
Yes. So what you want is all these to be at the same volume, because Odyssey is going to treat these subs as the same sub. So especially when you have 2 that are matched to the same output, it's going to only be able to boost the volume independently. So, together. So it won't be able to do this independently for each of your 2 subs. So at the very least, your front left and your front right sub have to be the exact same volume. Your front right, your left back and right subs have to be the exact same volume. If you're going to do that, you might as well get them all the exact same volume, and then Odyssey should have to do very little.
Now, once again, in his case, he does have Odyssey sub EQHT. So once again, we're not actually going to go through the entire Odyssey setup right this moment. What he can do is just connect the front left sub and just connect the front right sub. We have physically not connected the back left and back right subs at this moment. And at the beginning of the auto setup process, it will output a signal from the subwoofer 1 output, because he has the Marantz. So it'll be outputting just a signal from the subwoofer 1 output, and it will actually bring up a thing on screen that says adjust the volume knob on the back of the subwoofer itself until the readout on screen says 75 dB. Now, what you're going to do is adjust it until it says 72 dB. And you're going to make a note of where that is on that volume dial for the front left sub and for the front right sub. And
you're just going to leave it right there, and that's going to be the end of it.
You're going to leave it there. It's where it's reading 72 for each of them. Then you're going to physically disconnect the front left and right subs and physically connect the back left and right subs and do it again. Subwoofer 1 output, adjust it until it says 72. Subwoofer 2 output, adjust it until it says 72. That's going to be the starting point. Now you have level matched all the subs. Each of your subwoofers will have a slightly different setting on its own volume knob.
That's right.
But they will all measure the same volume at the listening position, which is what we're after. And you already lucked out with a pair of subs with the same distance and the second pair of subs at the same distance as each other.
Right. Then you'll connect your front subs together to one input and your rear subs together to the second input, which is his next question. Should he combine the front left and right subs together out of one sub output and the back left and right the other out? Yes, you should do that.
That's correct. Yeah.
And what dB level should the volume knob be set to? We just told you that. In the past, he's liked to set the subwoofer volume about 3 dB hotter than what Odyssey sets. Even with his new 4 sub setup, is it as simple as just setting both sub 1 and 2 outputs 3 dB higher after Odyssey is finished? The answer to that is actually, isn't there like a sub boost button on these things?
There is that, yeah. There is a bass boost. There's like an independent, like just subwoofer. Like there's one that just brings up the center and one that just brings up the subwoofer outputs. And you can do it there, or you can do it in the manual setup in the subwoofer trim levels. Any of those. But the thing is, in all of these cases, so what he's going to do, he's used sub-EQHD, or if you don't have sub-EQHD, you can just use an SPL meter. You've played a test tone pink noise out of one subwoofer at a time, and you've adjusted the volume knob on the back of each individual subwoofer until the SPL meter, or the beginning part of sub-EQHD, measured 72 dB. Now you've got pairs of subwoofers working together. So the front, left, and right are both getting an identical signal now. And when you begin that first part of Odyssey, or when you measure them with your SPL meter, now you're sending a single mono pink noise, but now to 2 subs. It should measure 75 dB now, because now you have 2 separate subs, but they're both playing the exact same signal. They used to play 72 dB individually. Now they should combine to produce 75. And then the second pair of subs should do the exact same thing. At the end of all of that, you've put it all together. Because you're using sub-EQHD, it should give you 75 dB with all 4 subs playing now, because it realizes it's independently sending 2 signals. If you then decide, hey, I like that bass just to be a little bit louder, don't touch the volume knobs on the backs of the subs.
Seriously, you should take those things off.
Do it inside the settings of the AV receiver, and there are multiple ways to do it, which is actually kind of annoying that there's multiple ways to do it. I would do it in the manual speaker setup selection in the subwoofer trim levels, where all of your other speaker trim levels are. And yes, all you would do is, I mean, you might not even have to boost 3 dB for both subwoofer 1 and subwoofer 2 outputs. You might only have to boost like a dB and a half for each of them, or 2 dB for each of them. But you can certainly goose it a little bit to your taste. There's nothing wrong with that. But just do it in the subwoofer trim level. That's all.
Jonathan just emailed us last question, and said he's not worried about saving money. He's worried about size. So something smaller.
Well, so those B4s are small. I mean, they're a 4-inch driver.
Look at the NHTs then. They're tiny. They're like tiny. So if you're really just worried about size, then there are plenty. And don't worry about timbre matching too much. Don't get something horn loaded. Don't get something that looks like looks like a trumpet, something like that. Anyways, all right. So I think we covered all the subwoofer stuff right there. And who are we still talking about? I got distracted.
Jefferson.
All right. Jefferson also asks, he's recently bought a Nintendo 64. Kind of old school. Like blocky graphics. Oh, I remember when that thing came out, and like Mario 64, is that what it was called, or whatever, when there was
Super Mario 64.
Oh man, that was like I used to read a magazine called Next Gen.
Next Gen.
Did you know that if you read the credits in there, there was all sorts of snarky things that were in the credit, like the little things. Oh, I read every word of that magazine. Absolutely loved it. Anyways, 64 needs advice on getting the best picture quality he can out of his BenQ W1070 as the display. He's heard about a scaler made specifically for retro gaming called FrameMeister on various video game podcasts, but it's expensive at $342.
Woo.
That is expensive, and it's very specific. $342. It's a weird price, dude. It's usually $339.
Well, it's being imported from Japan, so there's an exchange rate thing going on there.
So he wants to know, can he use the upscaling as Marantz AV7702 Mark II for this? And if so, how does he set that up? If not, can we recommend another device or way of doing this? So the first thing that came to my mind was like, there's plenty of devices out there, but then I realized there's plenty of devices out there that'll help you scale things as long as you're going like HDMI. Yeah. Like all the stuff that doesn't do HDMI, they took off the market because nobody has it anymore. But yes, you should be able to do this with your AV receiver. In fact, that's one of the strengths of buying a higher end AV receiver, is that when you run into this issue, you have decent, if not great, scalers within and up converters within your receiver. Entry level receiver, the answer would be no. It's just going to pass this stuff through, and you're stuck with junk. And then your projector will have to do all the scaling, and which could be fine or could not.
But it would mean in that case having to run a composite cable all the way up to the projector, which could be more or less of a headache depending on how you've made things your setup.
Right, and that's one of the things I've done with my projector up here is that even though I knew I was never going to need it, I ran component video up to it. Now, why they run component? Because even if I ended up having to send it composite, I could just use one of those.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
And I could also use it for audio if I was going to, for some reason, I needed to send audio up to some place in the back of the room. I could send it up there and then run it back down the wall. I mean, I could do it. So it's pretty handy. But yes, you should be able to use your scalers. I imagine it's someplace within the video menu. That's where I would look.
It sure is. Yeah, it definitely has conversion. You can take any video input and scale it all. You can scale it all the way up to 4K 60 hertz if you want to, and output it from the HDMI port. So I'm assuming you're running HDMI from the Marantz AV7702 Mark II up to your W1070 projector. I'm assuming that's an HDMI cord. So you will be plugging a composite cable, a yellow video composite cable from the Nintendo 64.
It's going to look like all kinds of crap. I don't care what
Marantz.
conversion you put on it.
That was the only video output. We had to get to the PS2/Xbox original/GameCube generation before we had component video cables. So you're stuck with that yellow composite cable, 480i resolution, and the games were even lower than that. They were like 360i resolution inside.
Isn't like the Wii still composite video too? I mean,
no. Well, the Wii had component video, and then the Wii U is finally HDMI.
Yeah, HDMI. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, so you can do this. In fact, there's even a graph in the manual of the Marantz AV7702 R2 showing you all the up conversion paths, including from yellow composite cable all the way up to HDMI. So this can be done. You'll go into the main menu. You'll go into the video settings, exactly like Tom, predicted. There is a subheading under video called Output Settings, and there you need to turn video conversion on, not surprisingly. You need to activate the interlaced progressive scaler, which is just called IP scaler. You need to activate that, at least for analog inputs. It allows you to activate it for analog and HDMI, but I
can't think of a single reason why.
Cable box,
cable
right?
box.
Cable box could be 1080i. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter. You're probably only using it for analog anyway, but you do need to activate it. And then you need to set the resolution, which honestly, in your case, you can just leave at auto because it will detect 1080p from your W1070. And that's it. So you can leave that at auto. There is a progressive mode to switch between film mode or video mode. You can leave that at auto too because it will switch back and forth depending. So fairly easy. You just need to make sure video conversion is on and the interlaced progressive scaler is also on. That's it. And you're done.
There you go. That's what I would do. Dude, do not expect miracles here. All right.
It's gonna look fuzzy and blocky as all
fuzzy and blocky. Fuzzy and blocky is what you're in for. No amount, like you could pay the $342 for the other thing. You know what you're gonna get? Fuzzy and blocky. There is no. I mean, it's not a remaster. You know, when somebody takes one of these old games and remasters them, that's what they're doing. They're making it so it's sharp, even though it's still looks the same, but it's sharper on modern displays.
If you leave your W1070 set to its normal, whatever they call for 1-to-1 pixel mapping, where it's just taking 1080, 1920 by 1080 and throwing each pixel up, you're going to have black bars on the left and right because the N64 was still 4:3 aspect ratio. If you want it to fill the whole screen, it's going to stretch everything so everybody looks wide and short. It's going to look horrible, dude.
Banjo-Kazooie will look the same, so it'll be fun.
Going to look, but I mean, I've seen stuff blown up. I used to have, my projector set up back when I still had like an original PlayStation connected to it. It was fuzzy as all ghetto, but it was still playable. It was surprisingly still playable. Yeah. So yeah, it'll work.
Yeah. Balls will look like squares. What was that? Simran wonders about other subwoofer brands. First, let's scroll up here. Boss O Bass. They are well known on AVS, so that's always a good sign. But we never mentioned them. They're expensive at $2,600 a pop. But they claim to have 0 dB roll off down to 4 hertz.
Now that's in room. That's in room. They make no claims about it anechoically doing that.
And only drop -6 dB at 2.5 hertz. Do we have any experience or opinion of them?
No experience.
No experience. No, got none. Sorry.
Now,
if they want us to have experience, they're more than welcome to send us one of their subwoofers.
Absolutely. No, I mean, my opinion is that these are dual 15-inch drivers with a 4,000 watt amplifier.
Yes.
They are dual opposed setup. So these
top and bottom. They're cylinders.
These are top and bottom. Yeah, these are cylinders with one driver firing up and one driver firing down. The cylinder is sealed. Which is part of the reason why in a room it might extend all the way down to these single-digit numbers, because it has a what would you call a shallow roll-off, a 12 decibel per octave roll-off, rather than the 24 decibel per octave roll-off we'd see in a ported design. But honestly, these are exceedingly similar, other than being a cylinder rather than a box. These are exceedingly similar in design to like the Seaton Submersive, which has been around for quite a while, which is also a dual opposed 15-inch driver, 4,000 watt range type of amplifier. Quite a similar design. So there's nothing at all shocking about this. Being a cylinder design sets them apart a little bit, but the price is comparable to what Seaton's doing. The components are comparable. The size of everything, the wattage, everything about this is very comparable. Would not shock me in the least if they performed very similarly, right? There's no magic in subwoofers. You got a big volume of a box. You've got a certain diameter of driver with a certain amount of magnet behind it with a certain amount of wattage powering the whole thing. It costs a certain amount to make the darn thing, and what do you know? A lot of the things that are similar end up similar. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, AVS always goes ape for whatever the new subwoofer company is that promises to go louder, deeper, lower, whatever it is, right? They always go ape for them, and it's like some of them last, some of them don't. Where's Elemental Designs and Epic subwoofers now? Well, they're out of business.
Yeah.
Whereas HSU and SVS survived, so could have been the other way around.
They started with that same sort of hype. SVS in particular. I remember, when I came on the scene is when SVS, everybody was just like, there was only one answer to a subwoofer question. That's SVS, and for a long time, that wasn't my answer to a subwoofer question. Simply because they were too big and too expensive and too covered in wood. Basically,
I mean, I do like that they've gone with a cylinder design because it allows them to have the same volume of cabinet as those Seaton subs are basically like a 2 foot in each dimension. They're huge. Whereas by being a cylinder, they're still kind of big because it's a 15-inch driver, so you can't have a super narrow cylinder, but they can just make them longer and taller and, might fit a little better in your room. Yeah.
If you look on their website, they're like, you could buy one for this, and they show the second one right on top of it. I'm like, geez. Yeah. They look pretty industrial. I like the way they look. I'm for them. I just
I mean, very, very few people need subwoofers with this kind of output capability. But if you do, then there it is.
Where's our McMansion, dude? Why don't you get one of these?
Well, you didn't have $2,600 to spend on one.
Well, there you go. He could have gotten two from SVS with change. All right, another one he wants us to comment on is Arundel.
Arundel.
Sound, which seems to be available only in Europe. He hasn't actually listened to either of these brands, but both seem potentially interesting and exciting. What do we say? Well, Arundel, they have a line of speakers and subwoofers, and they have a couple interesting offerings. But the number one thing, the first thing I noticed, is that they have what looks to be, and I didn't really look at it, a soft dome tweeter inside of a horn. Is that what I was seeing?
Yeah, I mean, they're calling it a waveguide. It might as well be called a horn.
It's a horn. It's not a waveguide. I thought it was a driver.
It's not a compression driver. It's a soft dome tweeter, and the speakers, even though they're not remarkably efficient. So these look like what, if this was coming from Power Sound Audio or something like that, I would expect this to be a super high efficiency speaker, but it isn't. Right. So I'm a little bit surprised at it. It's going to be a slightly more directional speaker.
That's the thing that first popped out at me. They're going to be very directional. I mean, they might not be. Could very well be that they're not.
Well, I'm thinking they'll be similar to like a Klipsch because it's basically a horn.
That's what I think too. I think,
but without the efficiency, strangely.
Without the and then what they have is they have essentially one subwoofer, well, two, but essentially one subwoofer design, and that subwoofer design involves a 13.8-inch driver.
Yeah,
or so two 13.8-inch drivers, and then the box gets bigger.
And ported. There's one version that's ported.
I didn't see that. But then they also have one thing I kind of liked, simply because I know that there's people out there who would like it. I don't necessarily think it's all that useful, but what they made is a pedestal. And the pedestal has a sort of a mini subwoofer in it that is made to be used with their
with the
bookshelves.
Yeah,
and you put the speaker on top of it. And then it actually bolts in, which I thought was kind of nice. They do make a tower speaker, which I'm not sure if there's really any difference between those two things, except for maybe one's a little bit cheaper. But
yeah, I mean, given these prices, these are all listed in what, euros?
Right.
You know, so like 1,600 euros for, I guess it's the pair of their monitor speakers.
It's like 1.5 to 1. Is that what it is for euros? Is that what it is?
Something like that. Yeah. So I mean, basically, it looks like the center at 850 euro is probably what, like a $1,200 center or something like that. I mean, they're just plain. They're black. They're big.
I'm not super excited about these speakers. I have to be honest.
Yeah, the speakers I'm not super excited. The subwoofers, given the price, you know, like starting at 850 for the single.
Don't they only have like a 200 watt amplifier in that thing, or am I thinking of the REL that we're going to talk about later?
No, that's later. No, these are like 500 or 1,000 once they double.
Well, that makes more sense.
Dual drivers. So I mean, the subs look fine. The speaker. I mean, nothing about these looks bad. But I'm a little bit surprised that these either aren't more efficient or could handle more power, because they're like 250, 300 watt power handling, which a lot of speakers can do. So given that they're like big and plain and black and not efficient even though they look like they should be, and not super high power handling even though they look like they should be, and then these prices, I'm like, they don't make me excited.
Is why are you putting that tweeter in that horn?
Yeah,
that's the thing that concerns me, because I don't see anything there, any reason why that needs to be the case, other than that
you're trying to take it helps us lower the crossover point, but to I think they said what, 1,800 hertz? Is that?
I thought it was 1,500.
Oh, it might be 1,500. Okay,
yeah.
Well, 1,500 is a little bit lower than normal. So okay, if it's,
I'm gonna have to click on this thing now, because I don't have it open right now, so I want to.
But no, I mean, these ones, again, maybe they're the best thing ever. I don't. Yeah, 1,500 hertz is what it says is the crossover frequency.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not super excited just at first glance. Those looks at that price, it's like,
and everything's out of stock. Have you noticed that? They're like all out of stock. Like I keep clicking on stuff, and the center is out of stock. The monitor.
Well, that was another thing. I used to knock the old SVS for that too. Everything was perpetually out of stock. And that annoys me.
The subwoofer 1 is in stock, and the subwoofers look, they're in stock. That's what is in stock. Nope.
But I mean, this is very common. A lot of these companies that sell online, this is their MO, because everything's coming on a boat from China, so they have stock for a while, and then they go out of stock, and then they go, well, those parts disappeared, so now we have a new version, which is exactly what's happened over at Reaction Audio. Like, Reaction Audio had a line of speakers that looked interesting. They're all gone now. They're all gone, replaced by a new line of speakers with very similar but slightly different parts, because whatever batch order they made of the original parts, that deal is now gone, and so now they have transitioned over, and they're like, well, it's our new lineup. I'm like, that's not really how it works. You couldn't get the same old parts. So
yeah, so the tower's in stock, and the 2 or 3 subs that they have are in stock. So I'm guessing those other speakers are vaporware, or we really are going to offer these, we promise. So I honestly, I don't see anything here that makes me very excited about this. They also list all their frequency responses for their speakers, and whether or not you're sealing ports. And while that's fine, I guess, I'm never super excited about speakers in particular that are sealing ports.
Tom's talking about you can block the ports up with included port plugs,
and I actually don't like that in subs either. I'm like, just design the sub so that the sub, because I mean, the guy we just had, was it James? Not James. It was, who was it that had his rhythmic was making weird noises, and
John.
It just, just make it so it works the way it's supposed to, and then don't let me have any adjustment. If you're going to give me adjustment, just a little switch in the back that tells the speaker where it is in the room in relation is about all I really need.
They like the adjustment, because then they can say, if you don't like the sound, it's because you didn't tune it well enough.
That's right. All right, so here we go. Gary, Infinite Gary, Larry Pace, president of Darby Vision, was the guest on the Home Theater Geeks last week. He describes Darby's visual presence technology and how they create left eye, right eye disparity information from 2D images, which is then used to brighten or dim individual pixels, to enhance the sense of image depth.
Mm-hmm.
With 4K and HDR growing rapidly, Darby will naturally be releasing new products in the future. Plus, they still have their goal of becoming ubiquitous.
Yes. They want to be in every display and every source and used.
Their examples got Gary interested. What do we think will improve an already excellent image?
So, I mean, it was an interesting interview because this was actually more information about how the thing actually works than we've heard before. They haven't been super public about what they're actually doing. But I guess they got tired of people saying it's another form of edge enhancement or another form of like...
which is what I've said.
Yeah.
Which is what they told me when I was there with them, interviewing them. There's a video with me and Clinton, the guy at CES. So, yeah.
But ultimately, they are, I mean, by their own words, they are still ultimately at the end of all the processing, which might be very impressive processing. And certainly when they showed their examples on screen, it did look impressive. But they were still images where the stuff was applied to it, which is a little bit hinky. But ultimately, at the very end of it, what they're doing is brightening or dimming individual pixels. That's what they're doing. So, of course, the question arises, when you have HDR, and we have a wider range of brighter and dimmer pixels in the original image to begin with, how much will something like Darby be of any use? Because what so many people describe when they see HDR is it looks more three-dimensional because there's this larger contrast between the brightest highlights and the darkest shadows, and you can see all the detail in between, which is exactly what they're attempting to do, but processing 2D information. Well, of course, their claim was, well, we can take that and like make that even more hyper-real. Like it just gives them even more of a range to play with. That's sort of their response to that, but... Yeah,
I have not been excited about Darby Vision since it came out. Darby Vision came out too late.
No.
Darby Vision, if Darby Vision was here 7 years ago, we would have been all like over the moon for it. Absolutely, I absolutely believe that. We would have been over the moon for it because it would have been a game changer. But this is what you're describing right now is the exact same thing people said when they went from, CRTs to high definition.
Sure.
You're like, it looks 3D.
That's right.
No longer looks 3D, does it? Because we're used to it. But now something else new comes out. It looks 3D. But then we actually have 3D and nobody wants to use it because it gives you a headache. So, except for Rob. So, I really don't have any. I hold out no hope. And let's put it this way. If they were giving me stock, I'd probably be like, I'm good.
I mean, to me, Darby has been the thing where you get the Darby processor, you turn it on, you fiddle with the range that goes from 0 to 120.
You leave it at about 20.
You leave it at about 20. You kind of get used to it, and then you kind of get sick of it, and you kind of go back. Because as much as they say, and their processing is impressive, I'm not saying it's not, and there's certainly instances where it looks pretty darn cool and pretty darn amazing in some instances, but then there are also times where it gets it a little bit wrong, and you get a little bit of an artifact or a little something that looks out of place, and you go, well, what is the trade-off? Do I want the majority of the time it seems to enhance this image, or am I the type of person who's bothered by the 1 or 2% of the time where it makes an error? Because it does. Occasionally, It makes an error. So if you're like me and you're the person who's more bothered by the 1 pixel out of 8 million that isn't working, but once you see it, you can never unsee it, then you will eventually turn Darby off, right? But if you're the person who's like most people who is like, oh, hey, this looks more three-dimensional to me, then you'll enjoy Darby.
Let's just be honest. Nobody, except for the hyper video file, even changes their settings.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's the problem. I mean, honestly, regular people would be more impressed by Darby than video
But they'll
files.
never turn it on or
video
off.
Files are the only ones who know about Darby.
Yeah, it's just,
that's the conundrum.
Yeah, they need to be ubiquitous. What they need to do is like pair up with Vizio or something like that.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're getting into some displays and stuff now. So.
That's what they should be doing, and they should be like I don't know, they got no chance. Anyways, all right, I'm sorry, I just can't find a use for that. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that.
No, I mean, the people who look at it and go, "Hey, the 98% of the time that this makes it look more dimensional, I enjoy that, and I'm not bothered by the 1 or 2% of the time that it makes a small little error." I'm like, "Good on you, man. Go enjoy." But until now, it's cost a minimum of $500 to get it. And for a lot of people, it will be worth it. But yeah.
Rusty says that in addition to enjoying the information AV Rant provides, thank you very much, he appreciates our sound quality as well, which makes our podcast more listenable. Anyways, that some others where the host's voice aren't as clear due to distortion and noise. He's interested in making his own videos and recordings, and they'll be in a medium-sized acoustically treated room. He's only concerned with capturing his own voice. Okay. So what microphones do we use on AV Rant?
While you're looking at yours, I use a Shure PG58, which is a very inexpensive vocal mic. Think of the type of mic that a singer would hold on stage in front of their face. It's that style of microphone, which means it is a dynamic microphone, which in general are less sensitive, meaning you have to hold it close to your mouth. It's a straight down the barrel mic, so you point it where you want to capture the sound, and it has a cardioid shaped capture, which means that it basically doesn't hear things that are behind the microphone. It only hears what's directly in front of the microphone, the way that you're pointing it. It is the one that I use is an XLR connection, which means I have to connect it to a preamplifier to plug it into my computer. So I use an ART, that's the brand name, ART USB dual pre, that lets me plug the XLR connection into that, and then it goes USB from that ART USB dual pre into my computer. So that's the setup that I have. I don't think it's fantastic, but it was cheap. Yeah. So given that it sounds a lot better than the built-in mic on your laptop, that's for darn sure.
You can't use the built-in mic on your laptop because it's usually too close to the hard drive, and you just hear, or fans or whatever, you'll just hear the noise.
Yeah, and it also sounds better than a typical headset mic, which is what we were using before, was just headset mics.
We did use headset mics for a while, and actually the one that we had with the V Motos was not bad.
The V Moto. Yeah, it wasn't bad.
I use an Audio Technica AT 2020, and that's also I think it's AT. I don't know, look it up. Anyways, 2020 is the number. Yeah. Anyways, and this is also an XLR. It goes into a pre-Sonos, Sonos Audio Vox 44 VSL preamp, which is a nice one that one of our listeners donated to the podcast, that plugs USB into my computer. That has its own power source, so you plug it directly into the wall, which is nice because you're not drawing USB power from your computer, which I find slows everything down.
Now yours is a side address microphone.
Mine is side address. It is it is not the what did you call yours?
Dynamic. Yeah, mine's yours is a condenser microphone.
It's a condenser microphone, which makes it more sensitive, but it's also picks up a lot more noise, so you have to be a little bit more careful with it. And what I used to use was an off-board compressor, and what that allowed me to do was turn up the gain a lot more, and it would keep me from clipping. So that was a dynamic range condenser. Right. That thing broke. It didn't actually break. I plugged it in, and when I was in Australia, where they had 240 50 hertz, and I fried the little power thing, and now it's dead. So now the number one thing that you need to do, well, first of all, so those are the microphones we use.
Yeah, we should mention Austin's as well, because his voice sounds good on his podcast, and when he joins us on this podcast, he uses an Electro Voice Cobalt 7. That's also a dynamic microphone, similar to the one that I use, and then he plugs that into a Behringer. He actually uses a mixer first, because he sometimes has other sounds on his podcast that he's mixing in on the fly. So he has a Behringer Eurorack UB502 mixer, and then to put all of that into his computer, because that's all XLR connections, he has the Behringer UCA 233, which just takes XLR and turns it into USB. So that's what he's using. Now, he had an Audio Technica ATR 2500, which is exceedingly similar to Tom's, except it's a USB interface.
Yeah.
So the main reason he stopped using that is because he wanted to use a mixer. So he couldn't plug the USB directly into the mixer. But also, with a condenser microphone, because it is more sensitive, it means you don't have to have it right up to your mouth the way I have mine. If you're looking at the video, you'll notice Tom's is further away from his mouth, but you tend to need a shock mount, which Tom has, so that if you touch anything,
which I love, because now I can touch this thing and I don't have to worry about it as much. It used to be if I so much as breathed on the table it was sitting on, right, you could hear it. I love the shock mount. And
your room needs to be quieter because you tend to be able to pick up more background noises. So if you got fans going, or if you do have the microphone right up close to your mouth, you'll hear yourself breathing or mouth noises or things like that. Yeah. So the dynamic mic being like, just think of a singer's mic, right? You see the singers on American Idol or The Voice or whatever, and sometimes they're practically swallowing the darn thing. So it's a lot less sensitive. But if all you're trying to pick up is your voice, then that works, but you have to have the microphone right in front of your face. So that's really the only trade-offs.
Yeah, a lot of people say that this type of microphone, the condenser, has a more realistic sound simply because it gets more dynamics.
Yeah, it picks up more of the room and what's around you in that, yeah.
So that's why we ended up with this. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably buy a USB direct mic. Sure. And Audio-Technica offers a whole bunch of those that you can...
Including a great cheap one.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess the Blue Yeti is like the podcaster mic that everybody starts off with. So if you haven't already come across that one, I haven't used it myself, but it's fun. More importantly than any of that, though, is the processing that we do afterwards. So after we record, we record using the free program Audyssey. Audyssey, you take your audio. You usually I use normalize, which just brings all the kind of equalizes the track across for volume across the entire thing, and then I compress it for dynamic range, because you don't want people to have to keep turning up and down their volume on their whatever they're listening to us on. And then I go back and look for noise, and if there's noise, then I take that out using a noise removal, give it a quick listen to make sure I haven't turned myself into a robot voice, which you can sometimes do. Then when I'm editing the podcast, I put us all together and I level match us all manually.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons our podcast might sound better than some others is that we individually record our audio. Tom records his, I record mine. A lot of podcasts, they're doing what we do, or they're using Skype or something similar. We use Google Voice, or Google, what the hell is this thing? Hangouts. But
and then they grab the audio either from their computer or somehow afterwards.
One person does all the recording. So they're recording their own voice, and then everyone else is coming in over the computer. That almost always sounds worse. Or they have people calling in on the phone still sometimes. So that always sounds worse. Whereas if you just individually record, then that sounds so much clearer.
Yes, and you'll notice on our podcast, whenever we do interviews with anybody, we're usually using that sort of setup, and it will sound worse.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention in particular, so we mentioned that Blue Yeti, that is a condenser microphone. It's very popular because it has a lot of features. It has its own volume control right on there, so you can adjust gain on the fly. It also allows you to change the pickup pattern, so you can start with it in a cardioid if it's just you. Then it can go omnidirectional if you want to do, like, you're picking up a band playing in your room or something like that. Or you can do dual-sided, where one person speaking into one side and the other person speaking into the other side, sitting across a table from each other. And you can do all that on the fly. And it's a condenser mic. The other one is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, and there is a 2100 XLR and a 2100 USB. The 2100 USB is actually both. It is USB and XLR. So
nice.
Get that one, because it's so cool, because when you're first starting, or maybe sometimes all you're recording is your own voice, you plug it in USB, you can't get any more simple than that. It's a dynamic microphone, singer's microphone, hold it right up to your mouth. But then, if you do want to plug it into a mixer, you can, because it also has an XLR connection. And it even comes with both USB and XLR cables in the darn package, and it's like $65. So get the ATR 2100 from Audio-Technica. The USB version is my
honestly,
suggestion.
I would be just fine with a USB mic.
Yeah.
I really don't need an XLR and all this other stuff, but I'm got it now, so I'm not. If this microphone ever breaks, I have another one. But if if that one also breaks, because I have Dina's.
Oh yes, yeah.
That came back to me. All right. But more importantly, that is we record individually and then we put it together and we take care with our audio. Leighton, can we discuss the difference between lossless and lossy audio in both technical and layman's terms? Well, I think you're talking about file size compression.
Yep.
Is that what we?
Yep.
Is that what we think?
Lossless audio, such as FLAC, which stands for Free Lossless Audio Codec, or Apple
Wave.
Lossless. Well, Wave is uncompressed.
Uncompressed, right?
Or also something like Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio, which are lossless compression programs. Compare those to something like MP3 or AAC, which are both lossy, or Dolby Digital or regular DTS, like original DTS, or in fact Dolby Digital Plus or DTS HD high resolution. All of those are examples of lossy audio compression. So yeah, what's the difference?
Okay, so the idea here is that an audio track was created at whatever level it was created at, and then the guy or gal that was making it got done and said, okay, this is it. All right. And maybe it might be at some sort of weird high level, 384 something, a million bit. And they get it back down to, they basically convert it to whatever is going to be the master. Let's say this is the original. This is, all the noise has been taken out, any sort of weird artifacts from any of the processing we've done has been taken out. This is it. This is the original. That would be lossless. All right. If you can get that would be
the original. That's
the original, the master, right?
That's the
and
master.
then that is then somehow converted into one of these other formats: DTS Master Audio, FLAC,
Dolby
True HD, Apple Lossless. There was a WMA Lossless. I don't even know if that's
there was.
All those. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are different files that can be played back by different devices.
Yeah, they have different codecs, and codec just stands for coder decoder.
Which means that whatever that guy or gal made is one for one represented within that codec.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have the original. So if you want to figure out how many bits are in the original, it's literally the bit rate. So like CDs are 16-bit. Other files might be 24-bit or what have you, multiplied by the sampling frequency. So CDs are 44.1 kilohertz, or it might be 48 kilohertz or 96 kilohertz. You multiply those together, multiplied by the number of channels. So 2 channels, you multiply by 2. 5.1 channels, you multiply by 6. That gives you the raw data rate. Nothing has been done to it. Well, that's a big file. That's a pretty darn big file when that's all you do. So lossless codecs take that and they make a smaller file. Usually it's about half the size. So it crunches it down, but you have to run it through a coder to crunch it down. And then when you decode it and you expand it back up, because PCM audio, pulse code modulation audio, which is the end result of pretty much all audio, that's the original, nothing's been done to it, just the bits are there audio. You have to blow it back up to PCM to play it. Once you crunch it down and then blow it back up, that end result is identical every bit for bit to the original. So you crunched it down so you could store it or transmit it using less data, but when you blow it back up to play it back, it's identical. That's why it's lossless. Nothing has been lost.
And therefore, it's pretty easy to figure out what lossy is.
Yep.
Lossy means that the codec at some point loses some of those data points.
Yep. Some of it is thrown out.
What would those data points be? Well, it kind of depends on the codec. Mm-hmm. We did a podcast a while ago with one of our listeners that they took an MP3 encoder. So they took the original,
yep,
and then they compressed it down to MP3, whatever it was, 128.
Yep.
And then they took that MP3 file, subtracted it from the original so we could hear
the difference.
The difference
result.
And the difference is basically stuff that the computer, based on algorithms that were programmed into it, the computer has decided you can't hear anyways. You can't hear this stuff. So therefore, why do you need to have it on here?
Save those bits.
Save that file size. That way you can get the true 10,000 songs on your iPod that you were promised when you bought the stupid thing. So that's basically what's going on there. So how is it really stuff you can't hear?
I mean, at some point, no, right? Now,
yeah, it depends on how much you compress it, but yeah.
When you compress down to 320 kilobit per second MP3 or AAC, you're right. So you crunched it all down, right?
Yeah.
So the original file might have been, what is regular PCM? It's like 1.4 megabits per second or something like that.
I don't remember. Yeah.
So something in that realm. So you crunched it down to a much smaller data rate, and then you blew it back up. And when you blew it back up with a lossy codec, what comes out is not identical to what went in. If you compare the two waveforms, if you compare bit for bit, they are not the same. Information has been lost. But the more you crunch it down, so you go down to 256 kilobit, you go down to 128, whatever it is, you're throwing away more and more data to crunch it down, and eventually you can hear the difference.
Yes, that's right, and that's what we found when we did that test. Yeah. Like at 320, it's like,
man, flip a coin.
You can't. Even when you do the subtraction, you listen to it. Like, it sounds like the Ghost Whisperer.
There's little things here and there that were
not much. But what the real surprising one, I guess, for me is was that they compressed it to 128 and then took that 128 and compressed it again.
Ah, yes.
So that one, you could literally still hear the song. Like, you could sing along with it. There was enough.
The information that was thrown away was audibly the song.
Was audibly the song. You had thrown away part of the song. So, who would do that? You've probably done it. If you've ever taken a CD that somebody has burned for you from their iTunes or whatever, and stuck it into your iTunes and put it in there without changing any of your settings, you took something that was probably compressed to 128 when they imported it into their iTunes, and then they burned it to a CD at Wave, and then you stuck it into your computer, and your computer took it and said, whatever that is, I'm compressing it to 128
Crunch
as well.
It down again, yes. Yeah, so that is... that's a form
Very
of digital generation loss, right? Yeah. Like, that's sometimes they talk about generational loss in digital. That's a misnomer in this case, but this is what they're talking about, which is you crunched it down and threw away a bunch of data. You blew it back up. Then you took the blown up version, which has lost a bunch of data, and then you crunched it down again, threw away more data, and then blew it back up again. And it's like, you lost even more data when you crunched it down the second time. So,
You're like, that would never happen. It happens.
Oh, yes.
Not only has it happened, it's happened a lot. In fact, it's now making me realize that I've got a new computer and I forgot to change my iTunes settings. But it should have imported my old iTunes settings, but I have to check it. His second question, would using the analog stereo output from a CD Blu-ray player sound any different, better, or worse than the optical output?
Possibly.
Could I mean, in theory, it's conceivable that that
possible
that could happen, but
yep.
I don't know. What is your CD Blu-ray player, and what are you plugging it into? Because those are two things that I need to know. Like, if you took your Oppo and plugged it into a decent receiver, I'd be like, especially if you had that higher end Oppo, I'd be like, I don't know. I think you're going to hear the same thing.
Yeah. Now, if you took the headphone jack output from your laptop and you plug that in versus using the digital output connection, you might hear a lot more noise.
Yep.
Right. So we talked about this before. At some point, the audio has to be turned into analog in order to be amplified and sent to your speakers. So there is a digital to analog converter somewhere in the signal chain. So the digital analog converter could be in your CD or Blu-ray player, and then it will send out analog audio, and then it will go into your AV receiver, which will probably convert it into digital so that it can deploy bass management and things like Odyssey to it, and then it will convert it back to analog again. Or you can just send the digital sound directly out of the CD or Blu-ray player into the AV receiver, where it will do whatever processing it does, and then turn it into analog. So if you have a really clean signal coming out of the CD or Blu-ray player that is analog, and as long as the analog to digital converter and then digital back to analog converter inside your AV receiver is also good and clean, then everything will sound fine. If you have a noisy analog output from the original device, then it will just sound even noisier by the end.
See, the real problem I see here more than anything is the hate mail we could potentially get from people who say, I've tried it and it sounds totally different.
Yeah. And it can. We said it's possible.
It's possible. But not only that, even if everything is clean and everything is nice. A lot of times there's volume differences between these these two inputs. So as it comes into your receiver or whatever it is, the digital one is just a different level than the analog one, and therefore the A to B comparison, the people are like, oh well, this one's way better, it's way bassier, it sounds a lot more present. This other one doesn't sound, it sounds weaker and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, turn it up a little bit. And so it's really hard. All things being equal, bits are bits. They're coming from bits, and it should be turning into the same, the analog waveform. If all the DACs and everything else were the same, it shouldn't sound any different. You shouldn't be able to tell a difference in the blind test. Will you be able to? Will there be a difference? It could be. So
There can be, yeah. But I tend to favor keeping the signal digital as long as I can in the chain, because why go through multiple conversions for essentially no reason?
A lot of times that's what that's what happens too. It's like, oh, you've got some sort of DAC, and then it goes to analog, and then you plug it into something else, and that thing takes that analog, converts it to digital, so they could do base management, and it puts it back down
and
to
then back to it's
the analog. So like
the digital thing to begin with. And
if you had an off-board DAC and you were using Odyssey in your receiver, if you were basically anything you send into that receiver is going to be changed to digital so that Odyssey can do its thing.
Yeah.
So if you were analog into, unless you're going pure direct and bypassing,
then people do. Yeah, that's right.
In which case, then yes, you are fine. But if you're not, if you're using Odyssey still and you're using base management, unless you have analog base management like some of those Emotiva, I want to say integrated. They're not. I don't think
they were like the analog preamp that they had.
Yeah, that's really
not anymore.
All right. They've sold out. Since Rob has heard both the Ascend Sierra Towers with RAL ribbons and the Empyrean Varus Grand. You've heard the Empyrean Varus Grand Towers?
Well, this is funny because I actually haven't heard either of these speakers. I have technically not heard the towers with RAL ribbons. I've heard the towers with the NRT tweeters, and I've heard the Horizon speaker with the RAL ribbon tweeters, which sound essentially identical to each other. But technically, I haven't heard the towers with RAL. And then I haven't heard the Empyrean Varus Grands. I've heard the Empyrean Varus bookshelf speakers. So that's where we're starting.
Okay.
That's what I've heard.
So can you describe the difference in sound quality and why he chose one over the other? And if I have an opinion, I can give that as well, which I don't.
So what I have not done is a direct A/B comparison. I haven't taken, say, my Sierra 2 bookshelf speaker and directly compared it to the Empyrean Varus Grand, Empyrean Varus Grand bookshelf speaker. I never did that. So I only have anecdotal audio memory. This is what I recall of the first speaker in one setting, and this is what I recall of the other speaker in a different setting, which is a entirely invalid comparison.
I was going to say, that seems a pretty valid opinion. I feel like you can speak authoritatively on this.
So I really can't. I really can't tell you that, in a direct A/B comparison, what the differences are. I can give you my impression, which is that one of the things that impressed me about the Ascend Acoustics Sierra speakers with the RAL tweeters, be that the Sierra 2 or the Horizons, was in fact they produce less sound than pretty much any other speaker I've heard, meaning that when the signal says stop, they stop right on a dime. When it comes to distortion, there's extremely little of it. And all of that leads me to experience a feeling of greater realism, which is that I close my eyes and I am occasionally fooled, that your brain just does that thing where it's fooled into thinking you're hearing a real live voice or a real live instrument, rather than that uncanny ability we have to go, oh, that's something being played out of a speaker, as opposed to that's a real instrument. It's hard to describe what that is. I chalk it up to some amount of distortion, because that's really all I get. Some form of distortion is altering the signal in some way to say that sounds artificial versus completely real. Does that mean that I thought the Empyrean Varus Grand bookshelf speakers sounded artificial? No, I thought they sounded really, really good. My impression of them was these are really good sounding, really low distortion speakers. So in a blind AP comparison, I don't even know if I could tell them apart. I think I probably could. I don't think they have identical timbre. That's not my recollection of them as having
I would doubt they would.
I think I could probably tell them apart, but I don't know that for sure. And yeah, my impression of why I ultimately chose the Sierra speakers is because, to me, they produced less sound than any other speaker. Mostly it was that transient response. When something stopped, it really stopped on a dime. And that's hard to do. That's part of what the RAL ribbon tweeters offer, because they're exceedingly light, lighter than any dome tweeter material. They weigh almost nothing. So when it says stop, they stop. And that's more or less why I chose them.
All right, there you go. My opinion is you should buy the Varus grants. All right, Adriana, we're going to do this as the last one.
Really? Mad.
Yes. Well, we'll save them up for next week. Adriano, you can put up the diagram a second here. Is sorry to have wasted our time with the wireless subwoofer advice. His electrician, in quotes, has managed to run some coax after all when he threatened to make him pay $400 for a thing. Surprising. Okay, so his current sub is a REL 205. He's playing on a SVS PB2000 for the second, but in the pair, but wonders if the SPB 1000 might be sufficient for his room, since the difference in price in Australia is $1,527 versus $989.
Yeah,
that's a big difference. That's like $550. The room is roughly 15 by 20 by 8, but it has an opening to a hallway on the left side. Now, imagine you've got this up by now, and I'll press the button.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a layout of basically the entire apartment that he's dealing with.
But the right side of this is where the room is, and the hallway you can see to the left. But every single opening in that hallway has a door, from what I can see.
Yeah.
So doesn't add considerably more square footage, in my opinion.
No.
You might be able to get away with the PB1000.
Yeah, you're under 3,000 cubic feet here.
I would think that it would be okay.
Yeah.
As long as you close all those doors, like it should literally be like a mantra in your house. Close the doors.
Yep.
That's what you'd be saying every time your TV is on. Close the doors. No open doors in your house when the TV is on. It's just the base is gonna get sucked out of your room. So that's what I would say.
But yeah, given that you're under 3,000 cubic feet, I would say, in terms of output, for sure, you'd be fine with the PB1000 in here. It has sufficient output for this amount of space.
All right, we're going to leave that picture up for a second. I'm going to get the microphone closer here. Will adding either a PB1000 or whatever, a PB1000, really give him a pair of subs, or will his REL just be completely overwhelmed? It will be completely overwhelmed, I believe. But let me look at this again.
It's a 10-inch sealed 200-watt subwoofer, which is in no way the equal of the PB1000.
Not even close, dude.
Now,
that being said, you could theoretically, okay, you can take the picture down now. You could theoretically get the PB1000 and C. But I think what you're going to see is that you should have gotten the other one, and now you're going to have to wait for them to put another one on the humpback whale, and it's going to take forever, and you might miss out on some shipping. I would just get 2 of them and sell that REL. That's what I would do. Gumtree, buddy.
That's an option, for sure. I mean, the REL sub, it will not play as low, it will not play as loud. That doesn't mean that over a substantial amount of the audible range, you're not going to be able to have the 2 subwoofer effect. It's just that they are not equal to one another, and certainly the PB1000 can exceed the capabilities of the REL 205. So eventually, I would say you want to upgrade to at least twin PB1000s. That would be what you want to do eventually. If you can do that by selling the REL right now, then so much the better. But yeah, it's not like you absolutely should not even give it a try, but just don't expect optimal results because they are not similar in total capability.
No. Lastly, he asks, should he pay the extra $120 for the SVS sound path isolation feet?
Man, is that markup crazy? Because they're $50 in the States.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no. I'm sorry, SVS. I know you guys probably want me to say yes, but honestly, I think the sound path feet work fine. Okay, they are perfectly functional. I also think that you could pay a lot less for other solutions. So I would go with
like a blanket. Well, honestly, you gotta get like a moving blanket, fold it a couple times. There's your damping device.
You probably want something that looks a little nicer than that. Subdued, I think, is going to cost less than that.
I don't know, man. Those things are ridiculously overpriced.
Are they really?
Oh, yeah.
Look to see if you can find something a little bit cheaper. If you can't, they are perfectly acceptable. But yes.
And I mean, they look nicer. That's the thing. The sound path isolation feet just look nicer because they're all integrated and they look like feet. But
unless you have them on those round,
all you're looking for is a cushion.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's all you need.
I don't know. You know,
I mean,
do you need them? This is your home, is it not?
But it looks like it's sort of a condominium type of setting.
It could be. If that's the case, if you're worried about sound transmission through walls, well, you're probably going to be in trouble no matter what. But this will reduce the rumbling of your neighbor's walls.
Get a stack of mouse pads.
Stack of mouse pads. That is the worst idea I ever heard. I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm just saying
totally work.
That is ridiculous.
Just something squishy underneath. That's all you need.
Mouse pads.
It'll work.
Get one of those gel carpet mats that you put in your kitchen.
Get a bunch of Dr. Scholl's.
I think in Australia those cost 120 a pair.
I know. You just need something squishy, dude. That's something squishy. That's all
how big is Nathan's? Oh no, it's longer than that. Oh, it's really long. Sorry, Nathan. You were the straw that broke the camel's back. Did you see? You probably didn't see Ted's question. Ted just sent us a live question, which I don't normally
I did not
want to take, but this is truly short. Rob, did you go with the RAW tweeters on your Sierra 2s?
Well, that is the only option. The Sierra 2s are a RAW ribbon. That's what makes it the 2 as opposed to the Sierra
I know.
1.
The answer was yes, but yes, okay. Why or why not? Why he did, because that's what he wanted. Also, do you know of any professional reviews of the towers with the RAWs? You still don't need towers, Ted. Ted, you don't need towers.
I can tell you if you got the Horizons, because you can use the Horizons as gigantic bookshelf speakers. Those will have all the dynamics you could ever possibly hope for. So will the Sierra 2s in your room, Ted. In your room, Ted. The Sierra 2s will be absolutely fine. But no, there aren't actually any professional reviews out there of the Sierra Towers with the RAL ribbon upgrades. Interestingly, Dave literally sells out those speakers before they're even manufactured. He's on a constant backlog of them, so he hasn't bothered to send them out to any reviewers because he's like, my cabinet maker can't keep up with the demand. So no, you can't hear it. You can take my word for it. You could get the Imperium Varus Grands. You can take our word for it on those too. And those you can return for absolutely free if they don't float.
He's going for neutrality and realism and the ability to play loud. Well, you're going to be sitting close enough to him that everything's going to be loud. Neutrality and realism is going to be a matter of degrees between the two speakers you're thinking of. But it seems like you're leaning in this direction, and you'll be fine. You do not need towers. You don't need towers.
Not in that room. Not from that close.
No. All right. So, questions for next week. We have Nathan with a slew, Johnny D with a receiver that won't play to zone 2.
Oh, darn. I wanted to get to that one. I did a whole bunch of research on that.
Tom K, who sold his Emotiva and needs us to hold his hand. Jonathan again, who's got some stuff about HDR metadata. And that's it for right now.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for spending another hour and a half with us. We want to thank our listeners of the week, Jeff, for his donation.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
And Tom for talking us up to Accessories for Less and verifying that there are actual people on the other end of wherever those emails go.
And they've heard about AV Rant that's starting to creep in. They're like, oh, those guys again.
Those guys again. All right. This is the podcast that answers your question. To get them answered, all you have to do is ask. Email us at Rob at AV Rant, Tom at AV Rant, but most importantly, question at avrant.com.
Question at avrant.com. That's where you
go to the website, www.avrant.com, where you can also buy us a cup of coffee, which leaves us a PayPal donation that helps support the podcast, pay for our hosting fees, and all that other good stuff. Eventually, we'll buy Rob another speaker because clearly that's what that man needs.
Another pair. Got to get to 13.
Gotta go to facebook.com/AV Rant Podcast if you want to interact with us there. Twitter at First Reflect for Rob, at AV Rant_Tom for me, and at Austin Pond for Austin, our producer. He also has his own podcast, We Watch Movies. It is a podcast, excuse me, about the mechanisms and biology of coughing. Since that's what I just did.
Yeah. I think you should change it to a podcast about 9.
9?
It should just be about 9. That's what it should be
about. I like it.
Yep.
There
you go, Austin.
9.
Good idea.
There you go. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Mantry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.